Hello everyone, Simon here. Welcome back to the Architecture of Dishonored 2 series. In this video, we are going to look at the Duke's Palace, which is that thing over there. That is the Duke's Palace. Um, where are we? We came up from the Palace District. If you remember, the Palace District, there was a wall at the end of the peninsula. We are past the wall now, and beyond the wall is the palace. So you can see the rest of the city back there, right? Where it extends back that way. Alright, so from a distance, the palace looks like that. What can we say about the Duke's Palace? Well, first of all, in terms of architectural style, it is completely unlike the city of Karnaca. So already we kind of get the sense that the Duke is somehow not well connected to the city, or is not part of the city. And to reinforce that sense, his palace is at the end of a peninsula across this little moat here, and then behind the wall here. So he really is trying real hard to separate himself from his city. So stylistically it is different from the city, and also physically he has removed himself from the city as much as possible. I mean, his city is over there, and his palace is right at the end of a little peninsula that is about as far away from the city as possible, right? So the Duke is, he's not really... I don't know, he's just not really in the city, like he's not one of the people, is he? Not at all. So the usual style of Karnacan architecture are these like very classical square rectangular stone buildings. Like, it's very rectangular, whereas the Duke's Palace is all angles and curves. In this game, right, we know that angles and curves are correlated with advanced technology. So the new stuff, right, the curved tram station and tram bridges. So in that sense, and also the timber roof, I don't know if you can see it very clearly, those are timber roofs. So timber construction, curves, diagonals, suggests that the Duke's Palace is new, possibly the newest building in the entire city, and in a new style, in a new, like, this kind of ultra-modern industrial style, which is unlike the earlier stuff. Now I want to say something about curves and diagonals in architecture. Curves and diagonals make things more complicated and more expensive, and requires more work, right? So what do I mean? Now consider this. Like, all the windows are the same, look at that. All the columns are the same, and then all the horizontals are also the same. So if you want to, like, so if you're the architect, and you say to the window maker, okay, I need, what is this, 4 times, what, 8? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 6, 48? I need 48 windows. And all of them are gonna be this. Right, I want you to make 48 copies of this. The window maker gets one diagram of one window, and he says, okay, you want this but 48 times. Alright, done. And so he goes off and he makes this thing 48 times. Easy peasy. And he just kind of, he makes the mold, like he sets up the mold, and then he just kind of puts all the pieces in, and then he finishes it, takes it out, and then uses the same mold, puts all the pieces in, takes it out, right? You see how, like, using the same machinery and using the same equipment, you can just make 48 copies of this. Easy peasy. Whereas when you have diagonals like this, you can't do that. Because, like, that window is a slightly different shape from that window, which is a slightly different shape from that window, which is a slightly different shape from that window, because you have an angle going this way, an angle going that way, and so they're all different sizes, and these are all different sizes. And so you can't say to the window maker, okay, here's one drawing, now make 48 copies of this. You have to give the window maker a separate drawing for each of these windows, and then the window maker can't just use one single mold or one single set of equipment to then make 48 copies. He has to make a separate mold for each window, or he has to make like a separate frame for each window. You can't just use the same kind of setup to just make multiple copies of it. So it requires more work from the architect in terms of drawing each window out, and then it requires more work from the window maker to then make a different window every single time. And so, like, you know, like diagonals and curves, okay, they're cool, but they actually have cost, right? They have monetary cost. Like, they cost more money, more time, more materials, more labor to make these complex shapes, because, you know, as we said, like these, all the columns are the same. You just kind of use the same shape brick all the way up, and it's just one shape, right? All the windows are the same, it's just one shape. Even these things, okay, there's a lot of them, like these little kind of support things for the pediment up there, and then all these little arches here, that little detailing. I mean, there's a lot of them, but they're all the same shape. So you can just use the same mold or the same equipment to just kind of do that, just kind of churn them out and just have a lot of copies of it. Whereas when you have kind of two diagonals and then a curve all joined together, everything's different shapes, and so you have to custom make every single thing. So that palace, even though it's not that big, it's going to be very expensive to build compared to all the other buildings. And so you might think, okay, well, but these days, wait a minute, you might think, well, today we have a lot of this fancy architecture. We have like a lot of curvy buildings. If you look at the Guggenheim Museum, or you look at the Olympic Stadium in Beijing, or you look at, you know, these days we have kind of curvy things all over the place. If it's so expensive, why do we do so much of it? You might think, I don't know if you talk like this, but the reason we can afford to do those things now is because we have computers and robots. So, like, instead of measuring and calculating curves by hand, which you would have done without the computer, you want to draw a curve by hand, you have to like actually kind of measure it out and calculate the angles, and so instead of calculating it by hand, now we use a computer to calculate for us. Right? You just tell the computer, okay, you have like parametric design, right? You just kind of give the computer 3 points, and you tell the computer, alright, calculate the curve that intersects those 3 points, and the computer just does it. It just goes, alright, done. And it just kind of gives you the exact numbers, the exact coordinates for how to kind of draw out this complex curve, because the computer is good at this stuff, right? And then you feed those diagrams, which were drawn on the computer. You draw the diagrams on the computer. You feed those diagrams into another machine, which is a robot. So you have like a cutting tool or a drill bit that is connected to a robot arm, and then the computer just tells the robot to cut this complex curve out. And you don't have to do it by hand. If you do it by hand, you have to like take the drawing, copy it onto the piece of wood or whatever it is, and then you have to painstakingly carve out the curves by hand, and that's a real pain in the ass. But if you have a robot, the robot just, alright, and it's done. So because today we have computers and robots, these complicated shapes aren't that complicated anymore. I mean, they would be complicated if we had to do it, but we don't have to do it because the robot does it. So for the robot, it's relatively simple. It's just, you know, just numbers, alright? I mean, the robot just follows the curve and then it's done. And so that's why today we are able to have these complex shapes, and then like architecture that's really like kind of like complex curves. Your curves going this way and also this way, and then the kind of diagonals underneath, and then everything else. We can do that because everything's computerized and roboticized. But not everything, but a large part of it is roboticized and everything is computerized. Now, in this world though, back in the game, they don't have these computers, and they don't have these robots. And so this palace, all these angles, this would have to have been done by hand. And that's just going to be expensive. It's not that you can't do it, it's that it's going to take a lot longer. It's going to take a lot more people, a lot more work. If you don't have the robots, it's going to take you a long time. And money, right? So, like, things to think about. So, like, in this context, in a world where there are no computers and robots, this is remarkable, because this takes a lot of time and effort to build shapes like this manually. Okay. Anything else I want to say about that? Oh, we can contrast this with Dunwall Tower as well. I don't know if you remember, in the first video, was it? We came out of Dunwall Tower, and we found that Dunwall Tower basically sits right up against the city. And we are going to go back to Dunwall in the next video, by the way, so if you don't remember, then keep this in mind. In the next video we'll see. Dunwall Tower is also kind of at the end of a peninsula, but it's not across a bridge like this. Like the Dunwall Tower literally like butts up right against other buildings. So Dunwall Tower is relatively closer to the people, as opposed to the Duke of Karnaca, who is making some serious efforts to separate himself from the people as much as possible. So the Duke is less a man of the people than the Empress of Dunwall. Okay, I think... Right. So let's go over the moat. We do get to use the tram. Oh, it's... Look at all this trash down here. So, if you remember, the Duke of Karnaca evicted all the people from these buildings to make his house more private. So he just kicked all the people out of these buildings, and I think this is their, like, their property just chucked onto the street. And everything here is closed because nobody lives here anymore. Alright, so coming back up here and onto the little tram carriage. There's no footpath across the moat, by the way. The only way to get across the moat is either to swim or to take the tram. Isn't that funny? You can't go across by foot. And then we get off the tram. Okay. It's just a bridge. Alright, so a little bit closer. Before I go inside, let's look at a map. What do we have? Journal, map. It's not any easier. Like it's all angles and shapes. it's not any easier to understand. Anyway, we are back here at the moment. So I mean 2 is basically the main floor. We are out here. There's a water feature out here, and then we get into the building, into number 1 dining room. So if we go in the front door, immediately we go into the dining room. On one side there is number 2, the Grand Throne Chamber, although it's not as grand as you might think. Anyway, the throne room is here. So dining room, throne room. 6 is an elevator, but that's not, the elevator's not too important. Not labeled here is a swimming pool and the guard room, right? So there's dining, throne, swimming pool, interesting, and then the guard room. And then back here, number 7 is stairs. So stairs, 7, 7, 7, 7, and 7. So this is the main staircase that links up all the floors of the house. The elevator also links up most of the floors of the house. So then we're back here, this is all garden, right? So these triangular things are like terraces out in the back garden. And then down here, these are also back garden. And then there's a basement thing. I don't know if I want to go down there. There's an underground basement thing, but it's nothing too special. This is special though. So this is a vault. So there's a secret vault back here, which lines up with this. Okay, so then going upstairs from there, there's a little mezzanine thing above the dining. And then some more balconies back here. There's actually nothing too interesting at level 3. If we go from level 3 to level 4, number 3 is Duke Abele's office. So this is his office. Back here, unlabeled, is Delilah's apartment. There is an apartment for Delilah. We'll talk about Delilah later on. She's one of the characters in the game. And then going upstairs from 4 to 5, this is the Duke Abele's chambers. So Duke's private chambers are up here, 5, and also 6. He's got a 2-story apartment. So there's 2 apartments. One apartment for the Duke, one apartment for Delilah, and then the rest of this is dining, throne, And other things. There's a kitchen down below here, by the way. So this is the basement floor, and there's a kitchen down here. Okay, hopefully you can remember all that, but it's pretty complicated because it's all different angles, right? So coming off the train, we get into this entry garden thing. Like, what is this? I mean, it's very fancy, first of all. Like, flowing water, fountain, statues, floating lights? I think those lights are like hot air balloons. And then like a pond. Very, very fancy. But it is a kind of a strange mishmash of styles, isn't it? Like the floor, you have these angular pieces of concrete, right? So there's the funny angles. Every single one is different, so like every one of these will have to be manually made, so, and they're all different from each other. So instead of having just like one rectangular tile and then just using the same tile over and over again, every single one of these is different and have to be handmade. And so this is like really modern and really angular. And then back there we have this very old and much more old style grotto wall. So a grotto is a Roman thing where they would have like caves with water in it. Like that's one of these things that the Romans were into is grottos. It's like caves with water in it. So this is sort of like a grotto thing with water coming out of the mountain, I guess. But that's like a much older style, right? And then these things, I don't know what. We've never seen those in the rest of the game, right? These floating lanterns. I think we saw some of these in the first game, in Dishonored 1. But like they're different again. Like those are different from these, and then there's this. This is a statue of the Duke, who is standing on what remains of a tree. So this is a tree stump. It's a real mishmash of a lot of different things, and I honestly don't know what to make of it. Except that if you read through the books in the game, it does say that the Duke demolished the old palace. So as we said, this palace looks very new. Like it's new architecture compared to, you know, what we had in the rest of the city. So this is new. There used to be an older palace here. That was demolished, and this is built in its place. So it's possible that this older stuff is actually remains of the older palace that was kept and then repurposed for the new palace. And in fact, as we go inside, sometimes we'll see like bits and pieces that seem a lot older, or at least they're in an older style than the new palace. It could be that they demolished the old palace, but they didn't demolish everything. They kind of kept parts of it, and then they reused the parts in the new palace. That's possible, and that would explain why there's this real mishmash of different styles in this place, because it's actually like two completely different styles jammed together, reusing elements of the old palace. As for this tree, there's a statue on a tree stump. Is this tree stump special? I don't know. But if you remember back in the Palace District, when we looked at it, remember there was like a family tree at the end of the Palace District, just in front of the wall between the palace and the city. There was a tree with a little like gazebo built around it, I guess it's a gazebo. And then underneath there are plaques with quotes from each of the dukes, each of the past dukes, and it's like the Abele family tree, I called it. So in contrast to the family tree, this tree has just completely been cut down. I don't know if this is supposed to be symbolic, but like cutting the tree to try to disconnect himself from his past and from the city. I don't know. I don't know if this is symbolic, but like leaving the tree stump here. I mean, interesting choice, right? I mean, I think it means something. I'm not sure what it means exactly, though. Okay, going from here into the house. Oh, it's like water features, like extravagant amounts of water features. The water features will continue into the back gardens as well. There's a lot of water. Alright, so now we get into here. We have this little canopy above the entrance, and there's this like a giant diagonal columns, which in terms of physics probably makes sense, because you have the roof. The roof, oh, can you see it from here? Kind of. The roof is like a giant diagonal thing, which will probably try to slide down, and so then you have this another diagonal column kind of propping it up. So in terms of physics, this probably makes a lot of sense because the forces are pushing down diagonally, so then your column is diagonal to resist the forces. But of course, if you're not paying too much attention to the physics, and since like this canopy here, you don't see the whole weight of the roof behind it. It looks kind of crazy having like a diagonal column. Like, why is your column diagonal, dude? Shouldn't you be like going straight up? But so in terms of physics, it probably makes sense. But the way the space is designed, it makes it look really, really outrageous and pretty cool, actually. But again, like doing stuff like this, you have to carve these pieces by hand, probably. It's very difficult to calculate the physics without having computers. I'm just saying, like it's not easy to do this. And like there's a reason why this sort of fancy diagonal architecture didn't really exist, or didn't exist as much before computers. Like they were relatively rare, right? Because it's hard. It's hard to calculate these forces without like really advanced math and computers to help you do that math. Alright, let's go inside. Underneath this entrance area, curiously we have a garden here with plants. Not sure how these trees and these plants grow, given that the sun is completely blocked. And I'm not sure about growing a tree under a roof, because you'd think the tree would eventually try to break the roof. Because it just keeps growing up, right? It just keeps pushing up, and then there's a roof on top, so there's a conflict here, right? There's a conflict here between the tree and the roof, and indeed between a conflict between the plants and the roof as well. Again, I'm not sure if this is supposed to be symbolic. Is it symbolic of, you know, the city of Karnaca cutting down these trees and then like subjugating nature and then using nature for its own technology, and then I don't know if this is symbolic or if they just thought it's cool to have a tree inside the house. Even if it is cool to have a tree inside the house, it is not practical. It is really not practical, because you have to keep trimming the tree, and then you have to keep cutting it down because it will keep trying to grow up, and if you don't trim it, eventually it will just smash your roof and break everything as it grows upwards. So I mean, people have pot plants. People do have pot plants inside their homes. But that's different from this tree, right? This tree, we know how big this tree can grow. This is the big trees of Karnaca. Yeah, I don't know if this is sensible or not. Alright, so going through this doorway, as I said before, this is not modern. Look at this doorway. This might be a leftover doorway from the original palace, because this is a completely different style from that stuff, right? You can see like that style. It's all diagonals and clean lines. And then there's this stuff, which is a different thing altogether. Right? So this might be the old palace, but it's only the door, because as soon as we go through the door, we have the fancy new stuff again, for the most part. Oh, there's like these twisty wooden half panels where you can kind of see through the wall. It's kind of cool, I guess. Not sure how they make that stuff. Is it wood or is it cloth? It is wood, right? Okay, anyway. Dining room. Look at that. And by look at that, I mean look at the structure. Look at the structure behind everything. Look at this stuff. Look at that column go around and up. Boy, is that unnecessarily complicated. Not only does it curve around, it also splits apart into 3 pieces. No, 4 pieces. It splits into 1, and then there's 3 things up there. So this is like a tree, right? They made a column that resembles a tree branch, even though it's not naturally like that. So there's like 1 piece down here, so there's a base, And then there's a piece that goes straight across. I think, wait a minute, why is there like a vertical and a horizontal there? Well, maybe that's a maybe there's two pieces. No, there's a piece there. Not sure about the vertical though. And then there's another piece there, and then this curves around, and then there's another couple of pieces back there. So this is a composite column. It's not one single column. There's several pieces of wood joined together into this shape. And again, like these curves, I mean, they're all the same at least. At least all the columns are the same shape, but they'd be really difficult to make. Like it would take a lot of labor to make fancy curves like this. These curves remind me of Antoni Gaudi's architecture. Gaudi is a Spanish, yes, he's a Spanish architect. So that's Gaudi there, that's what he looks like. He looks like that. And his architecture looks like this. So Gaudi is an interesting and unusual architect, right? It looks like this. Gaudi didn't like straight lines. He didn't like straight lines and he doesn't like sharp angles. If I remember right, he believed that curves are just more natural, and whereas straight lines and angles are unnatural, which is true. Which is true. Like straight lines and angles are kind of unnatural, unless you're talking about crystals, quartz crystals or something. But for the most part, curves are more natural. And if you look at this, this is stone, and so then each of these pieces of stone are different, are a different shape, right? So they're like all hand carved into these complicated shapes. I guess, I mean, these two are the same, right? And maybe these are the same, but otherwise very complex. So he does these kind of complex stone things that require a lot of labor, and they're very cool, right? They're very cool, very interesting, but also very expensive and also very time consuming to build. And his most famous work is the Sagrada Familia, which is this. It's a massive cathedral. That is in his style, and so everything is like carved by hand, or it was. He tried to have everything carved by hand. They're all different shapes, they're all curves, and like this. So here we can see the diagonal columns. And they are diagonal because the forces from above are pushing down in those directions, because you have an arch above, and so when you push down on the arch, it kind of tries to splay outwards, and so then the columns are pushing back against it. And so structurally it's correct, but again it's very difficult to calculate this stuff, and it's also very difficult to build this stuff. You're trying to build a diagonal column. It's kind of complicated. So that's Gaudi. And he's unusual, but also very cool. But the problem with his architecture, and it's really exemplified by the Sagrada Familia, is that it was just too expensive to build, right? The Sagrada Familia took well over 100 years to build because they didn't have enough money. So these are like, there's a church, and so they're religious people, and they're just gathering donations. They're gathering donations to build this thing, and the donations, like who's gonna donate so much money, right? And so they get a bit of money, they build a bit more of it, and then they get a bit more money, and they build a bit more for it. And this went on for like over 100 years, and the entire time it was incredibly difficult to try to figure out how to build this thing. And Gaudi himself died, right? He's dead now. And he didn't. So then he left behind the unfinished cathedral for other people to try to figure out. And I mean, even I don't know if he really understood the entire thing himself, because he didn't have complete drawings. He didn't ever have complete drawings. Kind of have like drawings for parts of things, but he never had the whole thing. So it's unclear whether Gaudi himself really understood the whole thing in his head. But then he died, and then other people tried to finish it, but then nobody else could figure out what he was doing either. And this went on for decades and decades, and they didn't have enough money, and nobody could figure it out. Eventually, until relatively recently, we have computers, and we have CNC machines. CNC machines, which is like computer-controlled stone cutting machines. So only in recent decades, a group of architects, I forgot who they were, but they came along and they said, okay, you know what? We can do this. We have computers now. We're going to use our computers to calculate what Gaudi was going to do with the other parts of the cathedral, because no one else could figure it out. So we just, okay, we just take what Gaudi's already done, and then we just extend that, and we use the computer to figure out the forces on all the columns and all the roofs and walls and everything. And based on these forces, this is probably what Gaudi would have done to build these columns. And so then you end up with like interior columns. So you have a column down here, and then they split apart into smaller bits, and then they split apart into smaller pieces again. Like that, you see that? So like, how would you know exactly what shapes to look? And they're all different shapes. They're all different shapes. How would you know? The way you would know is if you had a computer to work out the forces, you'd have the weight of the roof, and then you divide the weight of the roof onto all these different columns, and then you just kind of calculate the forces, and then you draw the lines back along the forces, and the thickness of the columns corresponds to how much force there is, and then you just do it and you just build it, right? And then like how do you, okay, how do you make this shape though? All right, are you gonna hire people to carve all these complicated shapes? No, we're not gonna hire people to carve complicated shapes. We're just gonna have a computer do it, right? So we're just gonna have a robot, have a computer figure out the shapes, and then have the robot cut the shapes. And so then with the new technology, the Sagrada Familia is finally complete. So after decades and decades, after over 100 years, we finally have computers to figure out how to build this thing, and it's been completed now. Yay! So now you can go to Spain, you can go to the Sagrada Familia, and you can see the whole thing. And it's a little crazy. It's not a little crazy. It's a lot crazy. It's very crazy. Like it's utterly insane. Actually, is it finished? Maybe it's not quite finished. It's gonna be. If it's not finished yet, it's gonna be finished. It is utterly bonkers insane how complicated it is. And the idea that Gaudi tried to do this without computers is bonkers. Why would you do this? Who would do this? He would do this. Gaudi would do this. Alright, back to the game. This is significantly less complicated than the Sagrada Familia, so I guess this didn't take several hundred years. But nevertheless, this sort of thing is gonna face the same problem, right? It's complicated. It's gonna take a long time for the architect to figure out how to build this. And then after the architects figured it out, it's gonna take a long time for the builders to actually build this. So this is extravagant. And it's extravagant in a way that you might not realize. Judging by the size of it, doesn't seem that impressive. Judging by the materials, I mean, it's just wood. It's not like there's a lot of different materials. Judging by like the intricacy, it's not that intricate. Like, I mean, these columns just smooth shapes. Like, it's not a lot of small carvings. But no, the curves are not easy to figure out. Anyway. That's this sort of architecture. The game doesn't really explain how they did this. They just put it in the game though. And I actually do have questions about how they did this. Because if you remember, the trees in Karnaca, they were all straight up and down. Which, I mean, this part is straight, this part is straight. Where did they get this part from? Because it's not just a straight piece of wood that's been carved in a curve. The grain of the wood goes around, it follows the curve, look at that. If the grain of the wood follows the curve, it means that the tree itself grew in a curve. And there are ways to do this. Either you find trees that naturally had a branch that grew in that direction, which is difficult. Like if you read about how they do shipbuilding back in the old days, shipbuilding also you need curves. So like people would like go into a forest and they just look at the trees, and then they'll find the tree that's like in the right shape, and they'll cut down that specific tree to get that specific curve, and then put that curve into the boat, right? So you like have to go into a forest where there are a lot of trees, and then you have to like measure each tree to figure out which curve you want, and then you cut specific trees. So that's how they used to do it, building ships with curved shapes. Because if you take a straight piece of wood and cut a curve out of it, the grain's not going to follow the curve, and so then they'll break very easily, right? The wood is only strong if you maintain the wood grain, and you have the wood grain follow the shape, right? If you don't have the wood grain follow the shape, then it's going to be weak and it's going to fall apart. So that's why they have to like actually go into a forest and find specific trees that are somehow growing in that specific shape. And if you do that too much, eventually you cut down all the right trees, and then you can't find good trees anymore, and then your ships are gonna be bad because you don't have the right trees for the right curves. So I don't know how they found curves like this in Karnaca, because as I said, all the trees in Karnaca go up and down. We've never seen a curved tree in Karnaca. We do see curved wind turbine supports. Remember that? The wind turbines, they're like a tripod, and the tripod legs kind of curve down. So again, I don't know how they did those curves either, because as we said, all the trees in Karnaca are just straight up and down. We never see a curved tree in Karnaca. So not sure where these curves come from. But anyway, they're here in the game, so here they are. Right. I think that's enough about the curves. So about the dining room, you'll notice the dining room is like literally right in the front door. Very interesting to me. I don't know if it's interesting to you. So historically, there's a lot of cultures, a lot of different cultures in different parts of the world have this idea about hospitality, is that if somebody comes to visit you, you feed them. And this tradition or this culture comes from, you know, back in the time, if you imagine back in the time before refrigeration, right? Before there's food available everywhere, imagine you live in a part of the world, it's kind of rural. You're either on horseback or you're walking on foot, you travel for several days, and then you get to your destination, and because you're traveling on foot, you can't really carry anything. It's not like you're carrying a bunch of canned food or anything. So you know, back in the olden days, you kind of rely on the hospitality of other people. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, imagine, I don't know, imagine rural Scotland, and you're like traveling from one city to another, or maybe you're like traveling from your village into the city, and the journey takes several days. Like, what do you do along the way? So the culture in a lot of different parts of the world is that if a traveler comes through, you just feed them. You feed them, you house them, and then you send them on their way the next day. And it doesn't really matter who they are, you just do it. Because this is the sort of thing that people do for each other. In order for things to work, people just kind of rely on the hospitality of others. I guess maybe they'll pay you, maybe they'll kind of give you some money in return, or they'll give you something in exchange. But the idea is that you give hospitality to people when they come visit. And this custom, in some instances, has survived into the modern day. I mean, I'm Chinese. Chinese people have this tradition where if somebody visits you, you ask them, hey, have you eaten? And then, hey, do you want any food? So this is a thing that Chinese people do that I know about, is that, like, we talk about eating a lot. It's like whenever you meet someone, hey, have you eaten? And then if they haven't eaten, oh, do you want to get something to eat? So, like, the idea of, like, hospitality. And in that sense, the fact that, like, the dining table is right at the front door kind of harkens back to this really old-fashioned idea of just giving hospitality to everyone who comes in the front door. You know, for a building that's so, you know, fancy and new and advanced, the customs are quite traditional. Putting the dining table right in the front door. In other cultures, if you play the game Skyrim, like all the Yao's halls have a dining table in the main hall as well. If you like in Whiterun, not in Solitude, interestingly, in Whiterun, in Windhelm, and in some of the others, like the Yao would be at the end of a big dining table, because again, like the hospitality thing, you know what I mean? Anyway, let's continue with the architecture here. big dining table. This is an indoor dining table. Again, very fancy architecture. In fact, the fanciest part of the entire house is the dining hall. So again, the focus, the most important part of the house is the food. Interesting, right? Around the side of the room, there's a few seating areas, which is curious. Not sure like who would sit here. It looks like they have a big parties, right? This room looks like it's set up for parties, and in fact, there's also music. Banquets might be a big thing, might be a frequent thing in this house. Okay, so coming off the side of the dining room, banquet room really, there's this. There's a little bit of a waiting area, beyond which is the throne room. I mean, the throne room. It's less impressive than the dining room. Isn't that interesting? Like, not only is it less impressive, the throne doesn't even face the door, right? I imagine you'd come in here, and you know, usually, like having the throne face you directly is more intimidating than if you're kind of sneaking in the side like this. So this is not intimidating at all. Whereas if you come straight through and the Duke is just kind of staring down at you, okay, that's more intimidating, right? Like, interesting choices. Interesting choice that this is not directly facing the door. And then the decorations and the ornamentations here are kind of basic and plain and ordinary and not very ornate. What's it like to sit here? Sitting here, you're facing... it's kind of off-center. I mean, the lights, it's off-center to the lights as well. Why isn't the throne like here? Oh, the lights are off-center. Wait, no, the lights are in a line between the door and the chair. The lights are lined up there, but the chair doesn't face the door and the door doesn't face the chair. These are interesting choices. And by interesting, I mean they seem kind of bad. I can't really make any sense of this. Like, it doesn't really make sense to not, you know, just face the... Because you want to intimidate people. Like, if you're the Duke, you're on your throne, you want to seem powerful, right? You want to, like, focus all your attention directly at the guest to, like, you know, stare them down. And this is not... Yeah, this is not it. It's not that. So... And also it's not very ornamented either. So throne room, not very impressive. Not sure what that's about. Maybe the throne room is not that important. Maybe it's more important to have banquets. I mean, the banquet's in the middle of the house after all. I mean, this is much more impressive. In fact, there's like a... Is there a chair here? No, there isn't. Oh, what's going on? Imagine if the Duke has like a big chair here. This is directly facing the door. This would be impressive. If there was a chair, but there isn't a chair here, so not sure what's happening here either. I can't make sense of this. This is very curious. I'm not sure about that. Alright. Over here, we have a swimming pool. Usually... Oh, there's a changing room here too, by the way. Changing room, towels. A swimming pool. Usually I'd say it's kind of odd to have the swimming pool in the public area next to dining and the throne. Because usually you have the swimming pool in a private part of the house because you don't want people to watch you swim. I mean, unless you really want to show off your body. If you remember Aramis Stilton's mansion, his swimming pool was in the back right corner of the house. It's not in the front of the house. So in the front of the house is the dining and the music room, and then you have to go all the way to the very back of the house, and then there's a swimming pool. Because you kind of want some privacy when you're swimming. Usually. Not here though. It seems like we have public pool parties in the Duke's palace or something. Because this is really just like right next to dining, and right next to the throne of all things. Because like I mean, swimming is recreation, and the throne should be business. But this is next to the yeah, I don't know. Don't know what to make of it. These things are carved. Okay, so they're like wooden things that are carved into twisty shapes. This seems very odd to have the swimming pool out in the public area. Alright, on this side we have a balcony, a bit of seating, and a smaller dining table that is in the open. So there's no roof and there's no walls. You have outdoor dining with a nice view. Very nice. Very nice. Look at this view. So there are a lot of balconies in this palace and a lot of views. So that's not very unique in this house. Right, on this side, also near the throne room, we have the guard room. We have guards sleeping in here. I mean, he's sleeping, kind of. And then we have a bit of the toilet here. He's sleeping in the toilet, don't worry about him. So there's a guard room here, and then the captain of the guard has his office here. I mean, the captain of the guard, his room is also quite well furnished, although it's more business than entertainment. There's a lot of shelves for records, right? But I guess he does a lot of work. He does enough work. Over here we have a chair with a severed hand and ear. This is the torture chair, I guess, because we have body parts being cut off. Let's not look too closely at that. It's kind of disturbing, to be honest. So the guard room being near the throne room and near the dining probably makes a lot of sense. You want your guards to be able to respond to any disturbances quickly, so they're close to the places where the public is likely to be. Alright, back in the house. Let's come this way. So behind the dining, we go straight out into the backyard. And the backyard is just all sorts of terraces and gardens and water features, right? So we have a water feature here. But let's just walk around the whole thing. Up here we have a terrace. They're playing target practice with live targets, in case you're wondering what's happening here. This is back down to the throne room, by the way. So on this side of the throne room we have another kind of a balcony, and then we have stairs down to like more terraces, and then another thing. Again, nice view. Right, so we have trees and terraces. And more terraces. And then back down here, more water features, more terraces, more views. Can you guess what's gonna happen next? Alright, more water features, more views, and then back over this way. More terraces. We've seen this water feature before. And then down here, can you believe it? More water features, more terraces, more trees. And then down the stairs, more water features, more terraces, more trees, more gardens, more views, right? And then around, going back up again, we have a wall here. Back here, more terraces, more balconies, more views. Someone is painting the view here, right? And coming back here, and we've run out of water features and views. Down here there's a little dock. I guess they move cargo up here. Like if you have to restock the kitchen, I guess you bring the food in by boat. Except you have to carry all that stuff up the stairs, which is gonna be a real chore. Right, so this is like the back service entrance. This circular thing is the vault. We're not gonna go into the vault just yet, but keep in mind in the back here there's an entrance to the vault. behind here. So just keep that in mind, we'll come back to this later on. Oh, there's these kind of floating lights back here too. Alright, so this is the back garden. Oh wait, there's one more terrace, my bad. One more terrace and more trees. Okay, that's all the back garden. It's just a whole lot of terraces and trees and water features. None of it particularly functional, right? They don't... I mean, there's views, but what do you use this space for? It's just recreational, right? It's just entertainment. So completely recreational. Let's get back inside the house. If we come in here, up these stairs, back there this is the stairwell. So this is the stairwell that connects all the floors of the house. Not gonna go there just yet. Instead we're gonna come back here. So to the side of the banquet hall, we have a little piano place. And then this room, it's unlabeled, but I think you can figure out what it is once we come in here. Cushions. Cushions and rugs and beds and beds. This is the orgy room where people can engage in group sexual activities. Right. And out here we have alcohol. I guess that helps you with your group sexual activities. An orgy room next to the banquet hall. Alright, up here we have more balconies. Oh, a third dining table. A third dining table, this time is semi-outdoor. So there's a dining table in the banquet hall that's indoor. There was a second dining table on the other side next to the throne room, which is completely outdoor. And now this third dining table is semi-outdoor, where there is a roof but there's no walls. So if it's raining, you can still dine here. But if it's too stormy, then you wouldn't do it because the storm would blow the wind, because there's no walls. So, you know, if it's nice and sunny, you go outside. If it's a little bit rainy, you can dine here and still be okay. There's three dining tables. 3 dining tables, lots of gardens, an orgy room, and then back here there's a game room and a bar. Have you noticed a theme? The theme here is that everything is entertainment. Everything in the palace is entertainment. Nobody does any work here except the guard. The captain of the guard does some paperwork, but nobody else does any work around here. It's just all entertainment. Gambling. Gambling. A picture of gambling. And people playing cards and people playing pool. And drinking. Yes, this is the Duke's Palace, ladies and gentlemen. Alright, so up here, we went up the stairs a little bit. Now we are above the dining room. A mezzanine area, which not too much going on up here. People just sit around. She's sitting there, I guess. The painting is crooked. They might have been partying a little bit too hard. Giant turtle, not sure why there's a giant turtle here. Seems to be here just for the sake of it. A few seats. And then back here. So this is kind of outdoors. This is definitely indoors. This is half outdoors. I think those are open. There's no glass in there, by the way. So this is like the entry foyer or something. It's kind of half outdoors. And we have smoking. They are smoking something. Not sure what they're smoking. Water pipes. So a little smoking area in the half outdoor. This is just louvers. I don't think there's glass in here. So this is some semi-outdoor area with water pipes. And then over here we have more seating. More seating that overlooks the dining. And then out here, more balconies. These balconies don't really do anything. You can look into the pool though. This seems a little creepy, but you can kind of you can watch people swim. Not sure if you're into that sort of thing, if you're into watching or being watched, but that's the sort of thing that happens in the Duke's Palace. Back here we have more balconies, more views. And this balcony overlooks the throne room, which is also interesting. This is maybe a little bit functional, right? If you have people meeting with the Duke, you might have spies up here, watching what's going on down there. Or assassins to kill people if you don't like them. So this might be actually functional in the sense that you might like have a space up here for people to observe the interactions between the guests and the Duke in the throne room. Alright, over here we have more balconies, and this doesn't go anywhere. I mean, there's a few tables up here if you wanna drink or eat, I guess. But this doesn't really go anywhere. Maybe you can also spy on people down there, not sure though. Not too much to see up here. And the view's not as nice either. I mean, this is okay, I guess. So I'm not sure what this balcony is about. Okay, back indoors. Let's go up the stairs now. So this is the main staircase, as we said. Let's go up the stairs. On the next floor, we have Delilah's apartment, but let's go to the Duke's office first. There's no labels on any of the doors, by the way. This is the Duke's office. Curiously, it's very dark. I guess the light's off. In the Duke's office, you can look down at the dining room. Isn't that interesting? So you can observe what people are doing down there from up here as the Duke. Very interesting. We have shelves, fireplace, and then over here we have the Duke's desk. And if you look, you will notice very, very little paperwork on the Duke's desk. The Duke doesn't really do any work. Look at him. He drinks and he doesn't do any work. There's no papers, nothing. To the side here we have a secretary's desk. It seems like the secretary does a bit more work. There's more paper out, and there's a typewriter right there. Right, so the secretary does a lot of the work. The Duke doesn't do any work. And we have a little meeting area here, which is quite nice. Okay, so this is the Duke's office. Back here, this is where the elevator is. So the elevator joins the floors of the house over there. Right, back to Delilah's apartment. So we need to talk about Delilah. Delilah is a witch, and she is the one who led the coup. She dethroned Empress Emily Coldwin, and had herself proclaimed as Empress Delilah Coldwin. So she usurped the throne. She is a witch. She can do magic. And in the story, in Dishonored 2, the story is that Delilah and the Duke conspired to take over the throne. So this is Delilah's apartment. She lives in the Duke's palace, and it's a big apartment. So there's like a music area. I don't think Delilah actually plays any music. There's a bit of a lounge area. And then back here we have this space, which has been turned into a painting room. So Delilah, part of her magic is through paintings. She can paint things and have them become reality, or have them affect reality. And so the paintings are a part of her magic. So this is important to her. Back here we have another balcony, we have more views. This house has a lot of balconies. A bit of a seating area. This would have been a dining table, but she's covered this dining table with her paints and things. I guess she doesn't eat in here. I'm not sure if she eats at all. She might not eat at all. But yeah, so she would have had a dining table here. Bed. A very large bedroom. With a desk if you want to do any paperwork. Not sure that she does a lot of paperwork. And then back here we have bathroom. With a toilet. Toilet, bath. Right. So her apartment is like a house inside a house. So there's the palace, and then she has a fully furnished apartment inside the palace. Except for a kitchen. She doesn't have a kitchen. But aside from the kitchen, she has basically a whole house inside the palace for herself. And then back here, there's a second entrance which leads directly to the Duke's office. Oh, back here is a toilet, by the way. So the Duke's office has a toilet next to it. So Delilah has a back door into the Duke's office. And in the Duke's office you also look down there, by the way. Or you can look down there. And the way the story is written, and the way the characters are written in Dishonored 2, is that Delilah is kind of the power behind the Duke. So the Duke of Karnaca, obviously he nominally rules over Karnaca. But Delilah is the one who kind of guides the Duke. And then later on she uses the Duke to give her access to the palace in Dunwall, and then she takes over as Empress using the Duke, right? So Delilah is the power behind the throne here in Karnaca. And that's why her apartment has a back entrance to the Duke's office, right? So she's hidden kind of in the back of the palace, but she has access to the Duke, right? You see how the architecture is actually like exactly that shape, right? You have the front, like you have the throne down there, you have the dining hall down there, and then Delilah's up here watching things happen, and then Delilah's up here like telling the Duke what to do. So she's the power behind the throne, you know, figuratively, but also literally. The palace, it's like she's in the back of the palace with access to the Duke. So the architecture directly reflects her position and her relationship with the Duke, right? Okay, so going from here, one more floor up. This is the top of this staircase, doesn't go any further. Oh, is that glass? Hey, a glass ceiling. Back here, this is the Duke's quarters. So first of all, Duke has a big bath. A big fancy bath. And then Duke has a big bed in the center of the room. Okay, let's think about that. Here we have, I think this is the wardrobe. I think this is the wardrobe. This looks like the wardrobe, right? It's huge. And you can see outside. Curious. And then we have another bed. And another bath. Right, so a bath, a bed, another bed and a bath. And then, oh, look at how big these windows are. Alright, more views. Although it doesn't really look at anything. More balconies, more views, by the way. So more balconies, more views. Alright, we know about this. More balconies, more views. And then if we go up these stairs, here, that's the Duke, in quote marks. There's a desk up here. Not sure if the Duke does a lot of paperwork up here either. And then another bed. And more balconies, more views. Okay. What's going on? There are 3 beds and 2 baths. What's going on? So... seems kinda insane. 3 beds and 2 baths, but actually... there's a Duke there. And then on the other bed... there's another Duke. There are two Dukes. The story is that the Duke has a body double. The Duke has another person who looks exactly like him, and who sometimes pretends to be him in high-risk situations. So there's a Duke, and then there's the body double. And they both live up here, because they kind of have to live in the same place for things to look right. I think this is the body double's room, so through the wardrobe, there is a more or less self-contained room back here. There's no toilet though. But there's a more or less self-contained room with a bed and a bath for the body double. And then out here, the much bigger, much more extravagant apartment. This is the actual Duke's bath. And then the actual Duke's bed is upstairs. And this bed is for orgies. Okay. Right, now we understand. Very, very elaborate. And it's actually kind of hard to decipher if you don't know what the story is. But if you do know what the story is, it makes perfect sense. First of all, the Duke is extremely hedonistic. Like, it's all banquets and orgies and parties. The entire palace is just banquets and parties. And he has a body double. So that's why he has 3 beds and 2 baths, because there's 2 people living here, and then there's an extra bed for the orgies. Right. Gotcha. Alright, so we are kind of at the top of the palace. Not quite. Let's go really to the top of the palace by climbing up here. The roof has no gutters. Not sure what happens when it rains. I mean, when it rains, the water is just gonna pour down this corner and then into... It's not... You need... No gutters, no downpipes. It's a bit of a disaster. But, yeah, I think that's an oversight, but... It's... I can let it go, I guess. Not everybody remembers the gutters. Gutters are important, you guys, in the real world. Like, if you don't have any water for... anywhere for the water to go, it's gonna flood your house. So the roof looks like this, and it looks like that, so that it's kind of like a... So it's like a big triangle going up that way, and then there's another triangle coming up this way. That's the shape of the roof. Very fancy, very complicated. But I want to come up here and show you what the terraces look like. Remember I said the backyard is just a whole lot of balconies and terraces and water features? Look at this. It's actually like 1 triangular shape, 2 triangular shapes, 3 triangular shapes. And this looks like a star fortress. What is a star fortress? Hopefully this still works. Okay, good. Star fortress. A bastion fort, I guess. So a bastion fort looks like that. And so it's a fortress in the shape of a star, basically. A bastion fort. The reason it's in the shape of a star is because during the age of gunpowder and cannons, you design the forts so that all the walls of the fortress are covered by cannon fire. So if you have this, you have a cannon in here that shoots in that direction. Well, this should be sharp. This shouldn't be rounded. You have a cannon here that's shooting that way. You have a cannon here that's shooting that way. And then you have cannons that shoot it out this way, of course. And so the cannons that shoot along the front of the wall, probably this is better. The cannons that shoot along the front of the wall protects the wall from anybody from trying to climbing over the wall, right? So if you just have a flat wall, you can shoot out, sure. But if somebody is right underneath the wall, you can't... I mean, it's very hard to shoot straight down at them because you have to like lean over and shoot down at them. Whereas you want to shoot out, if you lean out, then you expose yourself. So like, you know, when you have a flat wall, it's very hard to cover the face of the wall. If they're far away, you can shoot at them. But once they get close enough, it becomes very difficult to manage. Whereas if you have like triangular shapes like this, then you can kind of cover the next wall from this wall, right? If you have a series of triangles. And if I go down there, let's go down there. I can show you more clearly. How do we do this without falling to our deaths. So if we... Uh-oh. Oh, we're fine. Amazing. If we come down here... no. If we go down a little further... Alright, this is good. So, here... So the stars of the fort, it's like a little watchtower, except it's not a watchtower, right? So from here... You can shoot down there to cover that wall. Look at this. So if anybody's trying to climb up from the ocean and trying to invade your palace, you can shoot down there from here. And then from the other side of this wall, right, if anybody's trying to climb up the wall, you know, up there, you can shoot at them from here, right? So when you have shapes like this, you can cover all the walls. And you don't have any blind spots where the enemy can climb up the wall without you being able to shoot at them. So that's actually quite important for a fortress. And it's not obvious, is it? This palace is actually a very well disguised star fortress. Isn't that cool? Very cool. And it's so well disguised. And it's also not part of the gameplay because the gameplay doesn't really have you climbing up the walls. But look at this, like from here you can like cover that wall easily, right? And then somebody down there would cover this wall. Like it's very hard for you to shoot straight down here, but you can shoot over there fairly easily. And from there you would shoot down there as well, so you kind of cover each side. See that? There's no cannons in Dishonored, but there are guns. Yeah, so this palace is actually a star fortress. It's actually a fortress. And if you look at where the fortress is pointing, let's go climb back up again. Oh, get nope, get all right up here. So the points of the fortress point at the city. I mean, if it's a fortress, okay, it's a fort. Cool, it's a fortress. Where do you expect your enemies to come from? The Duke apparently expects the enemy to come from the city. The points of the fortress are pointed at his own city. So not only is this secretly a fortress that does a really good job of keeping out any possible invasions, the direction of the invasion is from his own city. Yeah, no, that's the Duke's palace. And this really, like, this is the relationship between the Duke and his city is antagonistic, right? It's completely antagonistic. Amazing, amazing. The inside is just all orgies and banquets and parties, and then the outside is to keep out the other people, like to keep out the riffraff from his own city, to make sure nobody invades his castle. Amazing. Amazing. And amazing that like the architecture it's all there, like all it's like it if you can read the architecture, if you know how to read this, the architecture tells you so much about who the Duke is and what his attitude is towards his own city. Isn't that amazing? Amazing. Amazing storytelling through architecture. And it's so hard to see too, like it's so well hidden, right? When you're down there, it's so hard to see this kind of defensive arrangement. And you only see it when you climb all the way to the top and you look down at it from above, then you can see it. Alright, so we're not quite done with the house. Let's go back inside. We've looked at all the floors above ground. Let's go and go to the basement. So if we come here, we go down the stairs. This is back at the ground floor. That's where the banquet hall is. If we continue going downwards, we have the kitchen and the cooking stoves, which it seems like we would need more stoves. Considering how big the banquet table is, and there are 3 dining tables in the house, I think you would need to cook more food. I think the parties are big enough that you're gonna need more food than this. I'm surprised there's only 1 set of ovens and stoves. I think you would need like 3 at least. But anyway, it might be just a slight oversight. They could have made this bigger, by the way, because it's all underground. They could have just made the kitchen bigger. And then we have a pantry area, and then, oh, what's this? This looks suspicious. I'll press the button. Behind the kitchen, a secret basement. And this is a different style. Look at the style of this. So I think the secret basement might have been here since the original palace, which, as I said, there was an older palace that was demolished, and then a new palace built on top. So this might be the old basement. Here, this is the conspiracy room. Remember I talked about... Anyway, here's a picture of them. So this is the Duke. This is Bobby Jindosh. This is... I forgot what's her name. Brianna Ashworth. And then this is... Dr... I forgot her name. Crap. Anyway, these are the 4 characters. And they are involved in the plot to overthrow the Empress, along with Delilah. That's Delilah there. Anyway, I'm not gonna go too much into the story, but the point is, the 4 of them were conspiring in the basement down here. So this is where they made their plans. Oh look, Dunwar. So here's a map of Dunwar, and so they planned their attack on the Tower of Dunwar from here. Inside their secret room, and then behind the secret room is the vault. So the Duke's Palace does have a secure vault filled with gold blocks, right? A lot of gold, very nice. And then some other things. Not sure what those things are. Delilah kept her spirit inside a fetish there. That's part of the story. And then we have some books. So this is a vault. The vault is surprisingly not that efficient because there's a giant tree in the middle instead of valuables. You would think the whole thing would just be filled with gold and silver because the Duke is, you know, greedy. But no, the vault is actually just a tree. I mean, I understand for, you know, storytelling purposes, right? Delilah's spirit is the most important thing to the conspirators. But having said that... Oh, and also, look how ornamental this is, or how decorative this is. We have the fancy architecture again. So the fancy columns from the dining room we find repeated in the vault. Which is very strange, because the vault is a secret room underneath your house that nobody goes to. So why would you need to decorate a room that nobody goes to? Because it's a storage space. It's a storage space for valuables that nobody ever sees. So you shouldn't have to decorate it. But it is decorated. It's decorated with very fancy columns. And that thing. Which, let's go upstairs. That thing doesn't even hold up the roof. It holds up the walls, I guess. Like the wooden frame is kind of buttressed against the wall, but it doesn't hold up the roof. If we climb up here, there's nothing supporting the roof. The roof is just a self-supporting steel dome, right? So I'm really not sure what this wooden thing actually does. It's not really structural. I don't know what it is. It's yeah. It seems unnecessarily decorative. Also, again, there's not much stuff in the vault. You would think the entire vault would be stuffed with valuables, but it's not. Anyway, this is the other door to the vault. Also strange having 2 doors to the vault, because the more doors you have, the less secure it is, right? If you have 1 door, there is 1 point of security that you have to worry about. If there are 2 doors, now there are 2 points of security that you have to worry about. Kinda strange that the vault has 2 doors. Usually you only have 1. Okay, now we're back out here in the back garden. I think I've said everything I have to say about the Duke's Palace. I didn't say too much about the ornamental style though. I mean, we did say that there's the ultra-modern stuff that is kind of stacked on top of the parts of the older palace that still exist. Like these doorways seem like they're from the older palace. In terms of style, I mean it's a brick wall too. In terms of style, there's like a real mishmash of different things actually. It's kind of weird. But that could be the consequence of, you know, the new palace being built on top of the old palace. But it's quite modern. And by modern, like modern is like simple. Modernism is all about simplicity, clean lines, and like rationality. So there's not a lot of like little carvings, not a lot of little decorations. Everything is actually it's relatively plain, and deliberately so, right? Deliberately not too garish and intricately carved. But the shape of the columns, like it looks rich without being filled with rich things, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense. Like because like the shapes are complex. So it looks fancy. And like the wooden, like these things, the like the twisty wooden half wall things. And the fact that the roof is kind of textured like that, so it looks rich without being filled with little gold decorations, if that makes sense. And it's very modern. And unlike the rest of the city. I wonder if the Duke is really like that though. I really have to wonder if the Duke designed this house, or if somebody else designed it for him, and it's not really his style. I would think, I mean, from what I understand of the Duke's character, I would have thought that he's more ostentatious than this. Like, I would have thought that he has less good taste than this. I would have thought that he has less self-control than this. Because, like, the style of the building is quite disciplined, right? There's no excessive carvings, right? It's not filled with shiny baubles or anything. It's very disciplined, very kind of sparse, very spare. So I guess somebody else designed this for the Duke. I don't think this is the Duke's personality. Anyway, let's not go too far with that. Alright, so let's summarize before I end the video. The Duke's Palace is ultra-modern. In fact, can I get a view of this before I get into the summary? I can't jump that far, can I? No. I can get up here. But where would I go? I guess that's alright. So the Duke's Palace is ultra-modern. Like, even in our world, today, this would be quite modern. I mean, it wouldn't be unique. I mean, there are other buildings like this, but it would be very modern, very stylish, even in our world today. It is very disconnected from the city, both physically and stylistically, right? So physically it's disconnected from the city because it's across a moat, over a tram, and also behind a wall, and also like at the edge of a peninsula that's not connected to the city. So it's, but also stylistically, like, nothing about this architecture says anything about the city of Karnaca, right? I mean, there's not even the tall trees. There's none of the shapes that you recognize from the city. And like, especially if you compare this with Aramis Stilton's house. You know, remember Aramis Stilton's house? It's just kind of squat and symmetrical and rectangular, whereas this thing is kind of tall and vertical Like look at this kind of narrow vertical rectangular shape, and then there's all diagonals, and so compared to Aramis Stilton, this is a lot more energetic and it's kind of wild, really. Uh, in terms of rooms and functions, it's all gardens and banquets, right? There's a huge garden that doesn't do anything practical except gives you a lot of nice views, and I mean it's a fortress. And then there's like 3 banquet tables, a massive banquet hall. The swimming pool is kind of out in the public. There's literally orgy beds and an orgy room, literally an orgy room. So it's just all parties and banquets. No offices. No paperwork ever gets done in this office, in this palace. And yeah, and it's secretly a fortress that is antagonistic towards the Duke's own city. So that's the summary of the Duke's Palace. Alright. I believe that's all I have to say about this building. Okay, so in the next video, we are going back to Dunwall. So in the game, after you deal with the Duke, you go back to Dunwall to take your throne back from Delilah. So in the next video, we're going to go back to Dunwall. I will see you there.